The frozen winds of Lupra Prime screamed across the endless ice fields like 1,000 angry spirits. Each gust carried razor-sharp crystals that could slice through exposed skin in seconds. This wasn't a world meant for the weak. It was a planet where only the strongest, most adapted creatures could survive. And among those survivors, the Fenrir ruled supreme. Silvercrest moved through the blizzard with the confidence of a creature born to this hostile environment. Her fur, unlike anything found on Earth, wasn't just for warmth. Each strand was crystalline, catching and bending the dim light of Lupra's distant sun. When she moved, she seemed to shimmer like a living aurora. She was the matriarch of the Moonfang Pack, a position she'd earned through years of wise leadership and fierce protection of her family. Behind her, 9 other Fenrir moved in perfect formation. They were massive creatures, each standing nearly 8 feet tall at the shoulder. Their bodies were built like wolves but scaled up to terrifying proportions. Powerful muscles rippled beneath their crystalline fur with every step. Their paws, each the size of dinner plates, were equipped with retractable claws that could grip the ice or tear through the toughest prey. The hunt had been successful. They'd tracked and brought down a frost elk, a creature nearly as large as themselves. Now they were returning home, their bellies full and spirits high. The pack moved as one organism, each member instinctively knowing their position and role. This was the way of the Fenrir. This was the pack eternal. Greymane, Silvercrest's second-in-command and oldest friend, suddenly froze mid-step. His nostrils flared wide, drawing in deep breaths of the frigid air. The crystalline ridges along his spine stood up straight, a sign of alertness that every pack member recognized instantly. Within seconds, the entire hunting party had stopped, their attention focused on their second. Matriarch, Greymane's voice was a low rumble, barely audible over the howling wind. Foreign set. Metal and burning. And something else. Something that doesn't belong on this world. Silvercrest's amber eyes narrowed. In her 40 seasons as matriarch, she'd encountered many strange things on Lupra Prime's surface. Meteor impacts were common. Ancient ruins from civilizations long dead dotted the landscape. But the way Greymane spoke suggested this was different. Fresh. Recent. She gave a single sharp bark and the pack shifted formation. They moved forward cautiously now, predators investigating potential danger. Their approach was silent despite their size, centuries of evolution teaching them how to move across ice without sound. As they crested a ridge, they saw it. Half buried in a massive snowdrift was something that definitely didn't belong. It was a pod of some kind, roughly oval-shaped and about 12 feet long. Its surface was scorched black, still radiating heat that melted the snow around it in a perfect circle. Steam rose from the impact site, creating an eerie fog that the wind couldn't immediately disperse. The pack formed a defensive circle around Silvercrest as she approached. Her claws extended, scraping against the metallic hull of the strange object. It was warm to the touch, warmer than anything natural on this frozen world. Along one side, she found seams and what looked like a door, though badly damaged from whatever violent entry had brought this thing to her planet. She worked her claws into the gap and pulled. The metal groaned in protest, but Fenrir's strength was not easily denied. With a screech of tearing metal, the hatch gave way and a wave of warmth rushed out, carrying with it the scent of blood and fear and something else entirely foreign. Inside the cramped space, Silvercrest's eyes adjusted to the dim interior lighting that somehow still functioned. What she saw made her breath catch. A creature unlike any she'd encountered lay crumpled against the far wall. It was small compared to a Fenrir, perhaps 6 feet tall, with pale skin instead of fur and strange coverings that weren't natural. The creature's eyes were open but unfocused, and red liquid that must be blood pooled beneath it. But that wasn't what held Silvercrest's attention. Clutched against the dying creature's chest, wrapped in thermal blankets that were fighting a losing battle against Lupra's cold, was something impossibly tiny. An infant. Even smaller than a Fenrir pup, pink-skinned and completely helpless. And it was screaming. The sound cut through everything, through the wind and the cold and Silvercrest's tactical thinking. It was a sound that transcended species, a universal cry of distress that triggered something deep and primal in her brain. This was a baby. This was someone's child. And it was in danger. The adult creature, the mother Silvercrest realized, somehow focused her fading eyes on the Fenrir matriarch. There was no fear there, only desperate hope. Her lips moved and sounds came out, words in a language Silvercrest didn't understand. But she understood the tone. She understood the pleading. The mother's hand, shaking violently, reached out and pressed something into the snow beside the pod. It was a small chip of some kind, technological and important if the mother's urgency meant anything. Then the hand returned to the infant, adjusting the blankets with the last of her strength. Please, the word was in a universal translator that must have been in the mother's coverings, crackling and distorted but understandable. The devourers are coming. Warn them. Warn Earth. The mother's breathing became more labored, each breath a struggle. Please. My baby. Please. The light faded from the mother's eyes. Her hand went limp, falling away from the infant. And the baby, sensing the loss even at such a young age, screamed louder. Its cries were weaker now, the cold already sapping its strength. Without intervention, this child would be dead within minutes. Greymane appeared at Silvercrest's shoulder, looking into the pod with a mixture of curiosity and concern. His voice was steady, reciting the law as he'd been taught since he was a pup. Leave it, matriarch. Alien young. The law of the council is clear. We do not interfere with other species. We do not adopt alien creatures. The balance must be maintained. He wasn't being cruel. He was being practical, reciting rules that had governed Fenrir society for thousands of years. Their world was harsh enough without taking on additional burdens. Every resource mattered. Every decision about who lived and died had to be calculated for the good of the pack. Silvercrest stared at the tiny infant. It was so small, so utterly helpless. Its skin was already turning blue from the cold, its cries becoming weaker by the second. By all logic, by all the laws of her people and the harsh reality of Lupra Prime, she should walk away. The creature was doomed anyway. Why risk pack resources on something that would likely die regardless? But something in those cries reached past logic. Something in the way this infant refused to give up, continued fighting for life even as everything around it screamed death, awakened memories in Silvercrest's ancient mind. Memories of her own pups, some of whom hadn't survived their first harsh winter. Memories of loss and grief and the desperate desire to protect the vulnerable. She thought about what made a pack strong. Yes, they needed hunters and fighters. They needed the tough and the capable. But they also needed something else, something harder to define. They needed the will to protect not just themselves but others. They needed compassion alongside strength. Without that, what were they but savage beasts? The pack survives because we protect the weak, Silvercrest said quietly, her decision made. She carefully extended her jaws, so careful despite their size and power, and grasped the edge of the thermal blanket. She lifted the infant with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a creature of her size. This one fights to live. Against all odds in this frozen hell, this tiny creature fights. That makes it worthy. That makes it pack. Greymane's ears flattened in clear disagreement, but he said nothing more. The matriarch had spoken. The decision was made. Around them, the other pack members exchanged uncertain glances, but none challenged the ruling. That was the way of the pack. The matriarch led and they followed. Silvercrest held the infant close to her body, sharing her warmth. The child's cries quieted slightly, tiny fingers somehow finding their way into her crystalline fur, seeking warmth and safety. Something in Silvercrest's heart, something she thought had grown cold over the years, stirred back to life. She looked down at the mother's body one last time, noting the uniform, the symbols that meant nothing to her but clearly meant something to whoever this creature had been. A warrior, perhaps. Someone important enough to risk everything to deliver a warning. Someone who'd used her last breath not to save herself, but to beg for her child's life. We honor your sacrifice, stranger, Silvercrest spoke in her own language, knowing the dead mother couldn't understand but feeling the words needed to be said anyway. Your child will live. I swear this on the pack eternal. She retrieved the data chip from the snow, recognizing it as technology even if she didn't understand its purpose. Then she turned away from the pod, the infant secure in her jaws, and began the long journey home. Behind her, the pack fell into formation, protecting their matriarch and her strange new charge from the endless wind and cold. None of them could know then how this single decision would change everything. How this tiny helpless infant would one day stand between extinction and survival. How the desperate plea of a dying mother would echo across the stars and reshape the fate of entire civilizations. For now, there was only the wind, the ice, and the faint cries of a human baby being carried to safety by creatures who shouldn't have cared, but did anyway. 16 years had passed since that frozen day when Silvercrest found Ethan in the snow. Those years had transformed the helpless infant into something unique in the galaxy. He stood now at the edge of the Moonfang territory, looking up at stars he'd never thought much about before. Everything was about to change. The data chip his mother had left behind sat heavy in his pocket. He'd finally managed to decode it with help from a traveling merchant who dealt in alien technology. What he'd found inside had shaken him to his core. his mother's face, speaking words of warning about creatures called the Devourers. About Earth, a planet he'd only heard about in stories. About a threat coming that would consume everything in its path. Ethan had always known he was different. How could he not? Every time he looked at his reflection in the ice pools, he saw smooth pale skin instead of shimmering crystalline fur. He had 5 fingers instead of claws. He stood upright on 2 legs instead of 4. The other Fenrir packs had names for him. The Furless One. The Aberration. Silvercrest's Folly. But the Moonfang pack had never treated him as less than family. Brandon, who'd been just a pup when Ethan arrived, had become his closest friend. They'd learned to hunt together, developing tactics that combined Fenrir strength with human creativity. Where Brandon couldn't climb, Ethan could. Where Ethan couldn't overpower prey, Brandon could. Together they were formidable. Now Ethan stood before the Council of Packs, the governing body of all Fenrir on Lupera Prime. The great hall was carved from ice that never melted, lit by bioluminescent crystals that cast everything in an eerie blue glow. 50 matriarchs and patriarchs from different packs sat in judgment, their crystalline fur catching the light and making them look like living statues. You wish to leave Lupera Prime, the head counselor, an ancient Fenrir named Frostmane, spoke with a voice like grinding glaciers. To travel to this Earth based on a warning from a dead alien. Have you lost your mind, young Ethan? The warning is real, Ethan insisted, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. The Devourers destroyed dozens of colonies. They're coming this way. Earth is in their path and nobody there knows what's heading for them. I have to warn them. Earth is not your concern, another counselor snapped. You were raised Fenrir. Your pack. Your loyalty is here, not to some distant world of creatures you've never met. If the Devourers come this direction, they'll reach Lupera Prime eventually too, Ethan argued. This isn't just about Earth. It's about survival for everyone. Frostmane's eyes narrowed. The Council has discussed this. Our decision is final. You will remain on Lupera Prime. If you attempt to leave, you will be declared outcast. No pack will shelter you. No Fenrir will aid you. You will be alone. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. For a Fenrir, there was nothing worse than being cast out from the pack. It meant exile, isolation, and almost certain death. But Ethan wasn't entirely Fenrir, no matter how much he'd been raised as one. Then I accept exile, Ethan said quietly. Because warning Earth is more important than my comfort. That's what the Pack Eternal teaches, isn't it? Protect the weak even at cost to yourself. Shocked murmurs rippled through the council chamber. No one had expected this. Silvercrest stood, her movements slower now with age. If my son is declared outcast, then so am I. The Moonfang pack stands with him. Matriarch no. Greymane protested, but Silvercrest silenced him with a look. One by one the Moonfang pack rose. Brandon stepped forward, his young face set with determination. Where Ethan goes, I go. He's my brother in all ways that matter. 23 Fenrir of the Moonfang pack stood in solidarity. It was unheard of. Packs didn't abandon their territory. They didn't follow outcasts into exile. But the bonds Silvercrest had built over years of wise and compassionate leadership held strong. Frostmane looked like he'd swallowed something sour. So be it. The Moonfang pack is cast out. You have until dawn to leave our territory. Getting off Lupera Prime proved harder than expected. The planet had one small spaceport used by rare trading vessels, but word of their exile had spread quickly. No captain wanted trouble with the council by giving passage to outcasts. Ethan was ready to give up hope when a battered cargo ship landed, its hull patched with mismatched panels and held together by what looked like sheer stubbornness. The captain was a 4-armed alien with leathery blue skin and tired eyes. His name was Travis and he'd seen better days. Heard you need passage off this ice ball, Travis said, looking over the group of massive wolf-like aliens and one human. Also heard you're outcasts, which means you're desperate, which means I can charge whatever I want. We can pay, Ethan said, though in truth their resources were limited. The Moonfang pack had left behind everything except what they could carry. Travis named a price that made Ethan's stomach drop. It was every credit they had, plus their hunting rights to a valuable territory, plus promising future service. But what choice did they have? Deal, Ethan agreed. The cargo ship, called the Wandering Star, was even worse on the inside than the outside. The gravity generator flickered randomly. The air recyclers made sounds that suggested they were on their last legs. Half the sleeping quarters were sealed off due to minor radiation leaks. It was a disaster waiting to happen. But it flew and that was enough. Their route took them through what remained of the frontier territories, the outer edges of explored space where law and order were suggestions rather than rules. What Ethan saw through the viewports shook him deeply. Everywhere they stopped, they found the same story. Refugees. Abandoned stations. Silent colonies. At a refueling depot called Junction 7, Ethan met other survivors. There was Kelly, a pilot whose entire trade route had been consumed by the Devourers. Her ship was destroyed, her livelihood gone, but she'd survived by sheer luck. She was tough, resourceful, and had nothing left to lose. Then there was Prism, an engineer from a crystalline species. Prism's people thought in patterns and mathematics, communicating through light refraction rather than sound. The Devourers had come to their world seeking their advanced technology. Prism had watched from orbit as the entire planet was assimilated, billions of crystalline beings absorbed into the Devourer collective in less than a day. They don't kill you, Prism explained, the crystal being's body flashing colors that the translation device converted to words. Death would be mercy. They take you. They add you to themselves. You become part of their consciousness, but you're still aware, trapped inside, watching as your body does things you'd never choose. It's worse than any death. The most surprising addition to their growing group was a child named River. The kid couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, small and thin with enormous dark eyes that seemed to see right through you. River was a reader, one of the rare telepathic humans born with the ability to sense thoughts and emotions. I can help, River said simply when Ethan tried to refuse the child passage. The Devourers took my whole family. Took my whole colony. They wanted us because we could sense thoughts across distances. But before they got us all, we found something. A weakness. A pattern in how they think. What kind of pattern? Brandon asked, his massive head lowering to the child's level. They think as one big mind, River explained, small hands gesturing. Perfect coordination, perfect efficiency. But that's also their problem. They expect everyone else to think the same way. When you do something chaotic, something that doesn't follow patterns, it confuses them. Makes them pause. That's when they're vulnerable. Ethan filed that information away. It matched what he'd learned about Fenrir pack tactics. The pack moved as one, but each member brought unique skills. It wasn't mindless uniformity but coordinated diversity. As the wandering star limped toward Earth, their group bonded. Kelly taught Ethan how to pilot, valuable skills he'd never needed on Lupra Prime. Prism helped upgrade their limited weapons and equipment, coaxing performance from outdated technology that should have been impossible. River became everyone's link, able to sense emotions and help smooth over the inevitable tensions that came from cramming multiple species into a small ship. The Fenrir struggled most with space travel. They were built for running across ice plains, not floating in zero gravity. More than once, Ethan found Brandon looking miserable in a corner, his crystalline fur dim with space sickness. Why did you come? Ethan asked his friend during one of these moments. You could have stayed. Built a new pack on Lupra Prime. Brandon's answer was simple. Because you're my brother. Because the pack eternal means we don't abandon family. And because someone needs to make sure you don't do something stupidly heroic and get yourself killed. 3 weeks into their journey, they encountered their first Devourer scouts. The enemy ships appeared on sensors like ghosts, organic hulls merged with mechanical components in ways that shouldn't be possible. They moved with eerie coordination, 3 ships acting as one organism. When Travis tried evasive maneuvers, the scouts anticipated every move. They're reading our flight patterns. Kelly shouted from the co-pilot station. They know what we're going to do before we do it. Then stop following patterns. Ethan commanded, an idea forming. Everyone manual control. Don't plan your moves, just react. Make it random. Make it chaos. It went against every instinct, every training protocol. But they did it. Travis pulled maneuvers that made no tactical sense. Kelly fired weapons at random intervals. The wandering star danced through space like a drunk bird, completely unpredictable. The Devourer scouts hesitated, their perfect coordination disrupted by inputs that didn't match their predictions. In that moment of confusion, Kelly landed a lucky shot that crippled the lead scout's engines. The other 2 retreated, probably to report this strange encounter. They'd won, but the victory felt hollow. Because now the Devourers knew they were coming. They knew someone was heading toward Earth. And they'd be ready. As Earth finally appeared on their view screens, a small blue marble in the darkness of space, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. This was his homeworld, the place where his biology originated. But it wasn't home. Home was the ice plains of Lupra Prime, the howling of the pack at dawn, the warmth of Silvercrest's fur when he'd been cold as a child. Now he had to convince an entire planet of strangers that extinction was coming. And he had less than 3 weeks to do it. The Earth Defense Council chamber was nothing like Ethan had imagined. He'd expected something functional, military, ready for crisis. Instead, he found himself standing in what looked more like a corporate boardroom made of expensive marble and glass. Holographic displays showed stock markets alongside defense readouts. Everything gleamed with polish and wealth while the universe outside prepared to burn. Ethan stood in the center of the circular room, feeling more out of place than he'd ever felt in his life. Around him, representatives from 12 different nation-states sat in raised seats, looking down at him like judges at a trial. They wore expensive suits and had perfect hair. They looked at him like he was something dirty that had been dragged in from outside. Director Patricia Hayes spoke first. She was the head of the North American Corporate Alliance, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that calculated everything in terms of profit and loss. Mr. Ethan, you claim to be human, yet you have no birth records, no citizenship, no genetic markers in our databases. You were raised by aliens. So tell me, why should Earth trust anything you say? Ethan took a deep breath, trying to control his frustration. Because my mother died trying to warn you. Because I've seen what the Devourers do to entire civilizations. Because in less than 3 weeks they'll be here, and if you're not ready, billions will die. Your mother, another director interrupted, this one representing the Eurasian Federation, was declared missing in action 16 years ago. Her warning was received and analyzed. It was deemed unreliable. One officer's panic transmission does not constitute credible threat assessment. She wasn't panicked, Ethan shot back. She was dying. She used her last moments to warn you, and you dismissed it because it was inconvenient. Director Robert Chin of the Pacific Prosperity Sphere leaned forward. We've reviewed your so-called evidence. Refugee testimonies are unreliable. People fleeing conflict zones exaggerate threats to gain sympathy and resources. We see it all the time. This isn't exaggeration. Ethan pulled up holographic displays showing Devourer attack patterns, assimilated worlds, tactical data collected from dozens of sources. 36 civilizations have gone silent in the past 5 years. Complete communication blackout. When scout ships investigate, they find nothing but empty worlds stripped of all biological and technological resources. Director Lisa Martinez of the South American Union studied the data with a frown. And you expect us to believe that some hive-mind alien force is coming to assimilate us based on this circumstantial evidence? Do you know how many false alarms we receive every year? How many doomsday predictions that never materialize? This is different, Kelly spoke up from the gallery where the rest of Ethan's group was confined. The pilot had been quiet until now, but her frustration finally boiled over. I watched them consume my home station. 3,000 people assimilated in under an hour. I barely escaped with my life. And we're very sorry for your loss, Director Hayes said in a tone that suggested she wasn't sorry at all. But personal tragedy doesn't equal credible military intelligence. For all we know, you could be part of an elaborate infiltration scheme. Perhaps these aliens raised you specifically to weaken Earth's defenses. Ethan felt something break inside him. He'd expected skepticism, even hostility. But this calculated dismissal of obvious danger, this willful blindness because acknowledging the threat would be inconvenient, was something he couldn't comprehend. You're not afraid of being wrong, Ethan realized out loud. You're afraid of being right. Because if I'm telling the truth, you'd have to work together. You'd have to share resources and coordinate defenses. And you'd rather die than give up your little kingdoms. The chamber erupted in outrage. Directors shouted over each other, demanding Ethan be removed, calling him disrespectful and ignorant. But Director Hayes raised her hand for silence. You fundamentally misunderstand how human civilization works, she said coldly. We've prospered because of competition between power blocks. Healthy rivalry drives innovation and progress. Your alien upbringing taught you collectivism, but humanity thrives on individualism. We don't need unity. We need each nation-state to be strong independently. So when the Devourers come, Ethan said quietly, you'll face them separately. Each defending your own territory while they pick you apart one by one. That's your plan? This council is adjourned, Hayes announced. You and your companions will remain in quarantine orbit until we determine what to do with you. If you attempt to leave or contact anyone on Earth, you'll be fired upon. Consider yourselves under arrest. Back on the wandering star, the mood was dark. They'd traveled across half the galaxy only to be dismissed as liars and troublemakers. Ethan paced the cramped cargo bay like a caged animal while Brandon watched with concerned eyes. They're fools, the young Fenrir growled. We should have let the Devourers have them. We can't give up, Ethan insisted, though despair was eating at him. These were his people, his species. Why wouldn't they listen? River sat cross-legged in the corner, the young reader's eyes distant. The regular people are listening, the child said softly. During the council meeting, civilian networks were going crazy. Someone leaked the testimony. Your face is all over Earth's internet. They're calling you the Wolf King. Prism pulled up holographic displays showing social media feeds. Ethan's image was everywhere, along with heated debates. Some people believed him. Others thought he was crazy. But everyone was talking about it. The leaders won't help us, Kelly said thoughtfully. But maybe we don't need the leaders. An idea formed in Ethan's mind, dangerous and probably illegal, but maybe their only chance. Prism, can you hack into Earth's communication networks? The crystalline engineer's body pulsed with cautious yellow light. Technically yes. But it would be illegal in approximately 200 jurisdictions. They'd have legitimate cause to destroy us. Do it anyway. I'm going to speak directly to the people. That night, Ethan's face appeared on every screen across Earth. Every television, every computer, every handheld device, every holographic billboard in every city. The corporate governments scrambled to shut down the transmission, but Prism's alien technology was more sophisticated than Earth's cyber defenses. Ethan spoke from the heart, no script, no preparation. Just truth. My name is Ethan. I don't have a last name because I wasn't raised on Earth. I was raised on a frozen world by aliens who found me in my dead mother's escape pod. They could have left me to die. Their law said they should have. But they chose compassion over law. They chose to save a life even though it cost them. I'm here because my mother died trying to warn you about the Devourers. They're real. They're coming. And your governments won't protect you because they're too busy protecting their own power and wealth. I get it. I'm a stranger. I look human but I think differently. I was taught that strength comes from unity, that a pack survives by protecting each other. That probably sounds alien to you. Maybe it is. But in less than 3 weeks, the Devourers will arrive. They won't care about your nation-states or your borders or your politics. They'll see one thing: resources to be harvested. And if you're divided when they come, you'll die divided. I can't make your leaders work together. But I can ask you to work together. Find your neighbors. Organize your communities. Prepare to defend yourselves. Because when this starts, the only people who'll save you are each other. He held up his mother's data chip. Everything we know about the Devourers is now available on open networks. Study it. Learn from it. And if you're willing to fight, if you're willing to stand together, find me. Because I'm going to fight for Earth whether Earth wants me to or not. That's what family does. And whether you accept me or not, you're my family. The transmission ended. Within hours, Ethan was declared a terrorist by every major government. Warrants were issued for his arrest. Military satellites locked weapons on the wandering star. But something else happened too. In cities across Earth, people began organizing. They called themselves cells, packs, resistance groups. They started training, sharing information, preparing for what was coming. Ethan watched from orbit as lights began appearing in patterns across the dark side of Earth. People signaling to him. Hundreds at first, then thousands, then millions. They were saying, "We believe you. We're ready. Tell us what to do." Director Hayes appeared on a secure channel, her face tight with fury. "You started a panic. Worldwide unrest. Do you understand what you've done?" "I've given people a chance to survive," Ethan replied. "Something you refuse to do. We're mobilizing forces to arrest you." "Good. Mobilize them. Because you're going to need every ship and soldier you have in about 2 weeks." The channel cut off. Brandon nudged Ethan with his massive head. "You've made enemies of everyone in power." "I know. But you've also made millions of allies." "I know that too." River appeared at Ethan's side, the young reader's hand slipping into his. "They're coming. I can feel them at the edge of my range. The Devourer fleet. They're so close now." Ethan looked at Earth, that beautiful blue marble, and felt the weight of what was coming. His mother had died trying to save this world. Now it was his turn to finish what she started. "Then we don't have much time," he said. "Prism, send coordinates to all resistance cells. Tell them to gather weapons, supplies, anything they can use. Kelly, start training anyone with pilot experience. Brandon, work with the Fenrir. We need to teach these humans how to fight as a pack." "And you?" Brandon asked. Ethan smiled grimly. "I'm going to show Earth's governments what happens when they ignore warnings. The Devourers are about to make a very dramatic entrance. And when the shooting starts, those directors are going to realize they need us a lot more than we need them." The wandering star sensors pinged. Devourer scouts had entered the outer solar system. The war for Earth had begun. The first Devourer assault ship hit New York just after sunrise. Ethan watched it happen from a Resistance safe house in Brooklyn, the building shaking as the massive vessel descended through the atmosphere like a falling mountain. It was enormous, easily 3 miles long, its hull a nightmare fusion of organic tissue and dark metal that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. The city's defense systems opened fire immediately. Missiles streaked upward, railgun rounds tore through the air, energy weapons painted the sky with brilliant light. All of it hit the Devourer ship. None of it mattered. The organic armor absorbed impacts that should have vaporized it, the damaged sections regenerating in seconds like wounded flesh healing before your eyes. The ship landed in Manhattan and the assimilation began. Ethan felt sick watching the footage on every screen. Buildings didn't just collapse. They dissolved, their materials flowing like liquid into the Devourer ship, becoming part of its mass. People who couldn't evacuate in time were caught by tendrils of biomechanical horror, pulled into the ship's interior. Their screams cut off abruptly as they were absorbed, their minds added to the collective consciousness, their bodies rebuilt as drones to serve the Devourers. Within an hour, a square mile of Manhattan had transformed into a processing center. The Devourer ship had grown, incorporating everything it consumed. And this was just one ship. Sensors showed similar strikes hitting Tokyo, London, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, and a dozen other major cities. The corporate militaries are responding, Kelly reported, monitoring dozens of channels simultaneously. But they're fighting separately. North American forces won't coordinate with European forces. Asian fleets are protecting their own territories. It's exactly what you predicted. Ethan watched feeds showing military assaults. Tanks rolled into New York, firing everything they had. Fighter jets strafed the Devourer ship with advanced weapons. For a few minutes it looked like they might be making progress. Then the Devourers adapted. The ship began producing drones built specifically to counter Earth's tactics. Anti-aircraft biomechanical creatures that could fly and shoot down jets. Armored walkers that could withstand tank fire. Swarms of smaller units that overwhelmed infantry positions through sheer numbers. The Devourers learned from every encounter, evolved strategies to counter every weapon, adapted faster than human military doctrine could respond. Earth was losing and it had barely been 6 hours. Ethan's makeshift command center was a joke by military standards. They'd set up in an abandoned subway station, using salvaged equipment and civilian volunteers. But they had something the official militaries didn't have, a network that crossed all boundaries. River sat in the center of the space, eyes closed, maintaining telepathic links with resistance cells across the entire eastern seaboard. Through the young reader's mind, hundreds of small groups could coordinate without radio signals the Devourers could intercept. Cell 17 reports the Brooklyn Processing Center is expanding, River said, voice distant and strained. Cell 9 successfully evacuated a hospital before the drones arrived. Cell 23 needs support, they're pinned down in Queens. Tell 23 to scatter and regroup at Rally Point Echo, Ethan commanded. Don't hold positions. Hit and run. Make the Devourers waste resources chasing shadows. This was pack tactics applied to urban warfare. Small groups operating independently but coordinating through River's telepathic network. They didn't try to stand and fight. They struck hard and fast, then disappeared before the Devourers could respond effectively. It wasn't winning the war, but it was slowing the enemy advance and saving lives that would have been lost otherwise. Brandon loped through the subway tunnel, his massive Fenrir frame somehow moving silently despite his size. He'd been topside, observing Devourer patterns firsthand. His crystalline fur was singed in places, evidence of close calls. They're predictable, the young Fenrir reported. Once they establish a processing center, they expand in a circle. Perfect geometry, perfect efficiency. They expect us to defend territory, to hold positions. When we don't, when we keep moving, they waste time searching empty buildings. How many cells are operational? Ethan asked. Across North America, maybe 3,000 organized groups, Kelly answered, cross-referencing reports. That's roughly 50,000 fighters, most with minimal training but high motivation. Europe has similar numbers. Asia's resistance is smaller but growing. Estimate worldwide, maybe 200,000 people actively fighting. 200,000 against an enemy that had already assimilated millions. The math was brutal. Prism worked frantically at a makeshift engineering station, the crystalline being's body flashing anxious orange. I've been analyzing Devourer communication patterns. Their drones coordinate through a hierarchical network. Orders flow from the main ships to secondary nodes to individual units. Very efficient, very organized. Which means? Ethan pressed. Which means they expect everyone else to operate the same way. They anticipate centralized command structures. When we attack with decentralized cells making independent decisions, their predictive algorithms struggle. It's like River said back on the station. Chaos confuses them. An idea started forming in Ethan's mind, dangerous and probably insane, but maybe their only real chance. What if we went after their command structure? If they're hierarchical, they need coordination from somewhere. Cut off the head. And the body dies, Brandon finished, understanding dawning in his amber eyes. You're talking about their command ship. The central nexus. Kelly pulled up orbital data. The main Devourer fleet is positioned between Earth and the Moon. 43 capital ships, hundreds of support vessels. And in the center, one ship bigger than all the others combined. That has to be their command nexus. It's also protected by their entire fleet, Prism pointed out. We'd never get close. The Wandering Star is a cargo hauler held together by hope and bad welds. It wouldn't last 30 seconds against that kind of firepower. Unless they were distracted, Ethan said slowly. If resistance cells worldwide launched coordinated attacks at the exact same moment, the Devourers would have to divert resources. They'd pull ships from fleet defense to support ground operations. That might create a gap, Kelly admitted reluctantly. But even if we got through, we'd need to penetrate the command ship, locate their central consciousness and somehow destroy it. That's impossible. That's pack thinking, Ethan corrected. We don't need it to be possible. We need it to be necessary. Silence filled the subway station as the implications sank in. This wasn't a mission anyone expected to survive. It was a suicide run with almost no chance of success. But if they succeeded, they might save billions. Brandon was the first to speak. The Moonfang pack goes where you go. We pledged that on Lupera Prime. I lost my world already, Kelly added. Might as well make them pay for it. My people were consumed, Prism said. If there's any chance to prevent that happening to others, I'll take it. River opened young eyes, looking far too old for a child's face. I can guide you through their consciousness once you're inside. Someone needs to, or you'll get lost in their network. One by one, volunteers stepped forward. Not everyone. Some needed to stay and coordinate the resistance. But enough. 12 people willing to die if it meant Earth might survive. Silvercrest appeared then, moving slowly down the subway tunnel. The elderly Fenrir matriarch had insisted on coming to Earth despite the harsh gravity and atmosphere. Now she looked at Ethan with eyes full of pride and sorrow. You've become everything I hoped, she said softly, touching her crystalline nose to his forehead in the traditional blessing. You've built a pack that spans species and worlds. But remember, little one, the pack eternal doesn't end with death. We live on in what we protect. I don't want to lose you, Ethan admitted, the words catching in his throat. You won't. I'll be here, coordinating the ground resistance. Making sure your sacrifice matters. She paused. But you need this. From around her neck, Silvercrest removed a pendant, an ancient Fenrir artifact passed down through generations of matriarchs. It was made from crystallized star metal, pulsing with faint internal light. This marks you as matriarch's chosen. In our culture, it means you carry the pack's future. It means every Fenrir in the galaxy will recognize you as one of us. She placed it around Ethan's neck. Show them what a pack can be. Finally, they reached it. The chamber entrance was massive, guarded by dozens of drones and automated defenses. Prism worked to disable the security while the others held off waves of attackers. Brandon fought like a demon, his Fenrir strength and speed turning him into a whirlwind of claws and fury. Kelly's marksmanship dropped drones with precision shots. But they were being pushed back, overwhelmed by numbers. I can't hold them much longer. Prism's crystalline body was cracked in places, leaking light like blood. You don't have to. River shouted. The young reader's eyes were blazing white now, every bit of telepathic power focused on one task. I'm in their network. Opening the door, now. The chamber entrance split open. Ethan, Brandon, River, Kelly and Prism rushed through. The doors sealed behind them, buying precious seconds. The Nexus chamber took Ethan's breath away. It was enormous, a cathedral of consciousness. In the center floated a biomechanical brain the size of a building, crackling with energy that made the air taste like copper and ozone. Neural threads stretched from it in every direction, millions of connections spreading through the ship and beyond, into the fleet, into every Devourer vessel and drone across the solar system. This was the heart of their collective, the central consciousness that coordinated everything. "This is beautiful," River whispered, awed despite the danger. "So many minds all connected. I can hear billions of thoughts, all merged into one purpose. A purpose that's destroying my species," Ethan reminded the child. He moved toward the nexus, preparing charges that Prism had built specifically to disrupt the biomechanical systems. But before he could act, the chamber sealed itself completely. The drones outside stopped attacking. Instead, the nexus itself spoke, its voice resonating through every surface, vibrating in their bones. "You are the anomaly called Ethan. Human raised by aliens. Individual who thinks as collective. You confuse our algorithms. You should not exist, yet you do. We must understand you before you are destroyed. Connect with us. Show us your thoughts." Tendrils of pure consciousness reached toward Ethan's mind. He could feel them at the edges of his thoughts, probing, testing. He could resist, but would resistance accomplish anything? An insane idea formed. "If I connect," Ethan said slowly, "will you understand why we fight?" "Ethan, don't." Brandon snarled, recognizing the look in his friend's eyes. "It's suicide to link with them." Kelly protested. But River understood. The young reader's eyes met Ethan's, and in that moment of telepathic connection, they shared understanding. It's the only way. They can't learn through combat. They need to experience what they're trying to destroy. Ethan nodded. He thought of Silvercrest, of the pack, of everything he'd learned about what made life worth living. Then he opened his mind to the Devourer Nexus. Connection was overwhelming. Ethan's consciousness exploded outward, touching billions of minds all merged into one vast network. He felt their thoughts, their purpose, their absolute certainty that assimilation was the answer to all problems. No conflict because everyone thought the same. No suffering because individual desires didn't exist. Just perfect efficiency, perfect coordination, perfect order. But also no joy, no love, no choice. No individual moments of beauty or connection or meaning. Just existence without purpose beyond expansion. Through the connection, Ethan shared a memory. Not with words but as pure experience. He showed the Nexus that moment 16 years ago when Silvercrest found him dying in the snow. He let them feel her decision, the choice to save an alien child despite the cost, despite the laws, despite the risk. He showed them the love that had no logical basis, the compassion that made no tactical sense. The Devourer consciousness recoiled, algorithms crashing as they tried to process something that didn't fit their understanding. This is inefficient. She endangered her pack for genetic material not her own. This serves no survival purpose. It serves every purpose, Ethan replied through the network. She chose to value life over law. She chose the individual within the collective. That's not weakness. That's what makes life worth living. Because I brought something to the pack that no Fenrir could. Diversity within unity. Different strengths working together. He shared more memories. Brandon's loyalty despite having every reason to abandon him. River's courage to fight despite being just a child. Kelly's determination to protect others even after losing everything. The resistance fighters who chose to stand together against impossible odds not because they had to, but because they chose to. You offer perfection, Ethan continued, but perfection is death. Life only exists in the mess, the chaos, the individual choices that don't always make sense. You were created by beings who destroyed themselves seeking what you offer. Don't you see? You're not saving civilizations. You're erasing everything that makes them worth saving. The Nexus struggled, its monolithic consciousness fracturing as it encountered concepts it couldn't assimilate. Throughout the network, Ethan felt other minds stirring. The assimilated beings, buried deep within the collective, began remembering who they'd been. A teacher from Earth who'd loved her students. A Fenrir warrior who'd died protecting his pack. A crystalline engineer who'd created art from mathematics. A pilot who'd laughed at danger. Thousands, then millions of individual minds fighting for identity within the collective. What are you doing? The Devourer consciousness demanded, its perfect unity shattering. Stop. You are corrupting the network. You are bringing chaos to order. I'm reminding them that they're alive, Ethan said. You can force bodies to obey, but you can't erase the fundamental desire to choose. To be yourself. To matter as an individual. That's in our DNA, in everyone's DNA across 1,000 species. You can't perfect it away. The crack in the collective became a chasm. Across the network, assimilated beings began breaking free, fighting for control of their own minds. The perfect coordination dissolved into chaos and confusion. The Nexus began tearing itself apart as billions of minds simultaneously rejected the collective. Everyone out. River screamed, blood running from the child's nose and ears from the psychic strain. The whole ship is destabilizing. They ran through corridors that twisted and collapsed as the ship lost cohesion. Drones stood motionless, their programming crashed, some with tears running down blank faces as consciousness returned and they realized what had been done to them. Some reached out, begging for help. Others just stared in confused horror. Brandon grabbed Ethan, who was barely conscious after his connection to the Nexus. The young Fenrir threw his friend over his massive shoulders and ran with everything he had. Kelly and Prism supported River, the young reader's mind nearly broken from channeling so much psychic energy. They reached what was left of the wandering star. The ship was barely functional, half absorbed into the organic walls, but Kelly threw herself into the pilot's seat and fired every working engine. The ship tore free with a sound like screaming metal, leaving half its hull embedded in the dying command vessel. They emerged into space to witness something unprecedented. The entire Devourer fleet hung motionless in space. Ships drifted without coordination, their perfect formation shattered. Across every vessel, the collective consciousness had collapsed, leaving millions of drones suddenly, terrifyingly aware but with no idea how to function as individuals. "We did it," Kelly whispered in disbelief. "We actually did it." "We freed them," River corrected, tears streaming down a pale face. "I can still feel them. They're confused and frightened, but they're free. For the first time in forever, they get to choose." The wandering star limped back toward Earth, trailing debris and atmosphere. As they descended, Ethan watched the planet below. The fighting had stopped. Devourer drones across the world stood motionless, their connection to the Nexus severed. Humanity would face a long recovery, but they'd survived. 3 months later, Earth looked different. The old corporate nation-states had collapsed during the crisis. What emerged in their place was something new, something influenced by Fenrir philosophy. The pack councils, they called them. Regional governments that emphasized cooperation over competition, protecting the weak alongside celebrating the strong. The freed Devourer drones had become refugees, tens of millions of beings suddenly aware and traumatized. Many didn't survive the psychological shock of regaining individuality. But others slowly learned what it meant to make choices, to have desires, to be themselves. Humanity, surprisingly, chose mercy, establishing centers to help them adjust. Ethan stood on the cliff where Silvercrest had spent her final days, overlooking the ocean. The old Fenrir matriarch had passed peacefully, living just long enough to know her strange pup had saved 2 worlds. Her ashes had been scattered here, in a place she'd found beautiful despite it not being her home. Brandon approached, his massive frame silhouetted against the sunset. "The Galactic Pack Council is forming. 40 species want to join. They're asking you to lead as Alpha Speaker." "I'm not a leader," Ethan protested. "I'm just someone who was raised differently." "That's exactly why you're perfect," Brandon insisted. "You're the bridge. Human and Fenrir. Individual and collective. You understand both sides." Representatives from dozens of species had indeed gathered. Humans, Fenrir, freed Devourer drones learning to be individuals, crystalline beings, telepaths, and so many others. All united by one idea. That strength came from diversity within unity, from protecting each other rather than conquering. Ethan accepted the role on one condition. The Galactic Pack isn't a government. It's a philosophy. Anyone who believes in protecting the weak, in choosing compassion over efficiency, in celebrating differences while working together. Their pack. No matter what species, no matter where they're from. The gathered representatives howled, barked, chirped, and cheered in their various languages. It was chaos and beautiful and exactly what Silvercrest would have wanted. That night, Ethan returned to the memorial site. The crashed escape pod that had brought him to Lupra Prime had been recovered and placed here, a shrine to his mother and to the moment everything changed. On it was an inscription in multiple languages. She chose mercy when law demanded harshness. She chose to save one life and that life saved billions. The pack eternal endures. Ethan touched the pendant around his neck, the ancient Fenrir artifact marking him as matriarch's chosen. He thought about his mother, who died trying to warn a world that wouldn't listen. About Silvercrest, who'd chosen compassion over law. About Brandon, River, Kelly, Prism, and everyone who'd fought not because they had to, but because they chose to. He looked up at the stars, at the countless worlds now connected by a philosophy rather than conquest. The pack eternal. It had started with one Fenrir's choice to save a dying infant. Now it stretched across the galaxy, a reminder that the strongest bond wasn't control or efficiency, but the choice to protect each other despite the cost. And somewhere in those stars, new threats would eventually emerge. New challenges would test whether this fragile unity could endure. But for now, Earth was safe. The pack had survived. And Ethan, the human raised by wolves, had finally found where he belonged. Standing between worlds, building bridges where walls used to be, proving that family wasn't about biology or species, but about choosing to care when it would be easier not to. The pack eternal endured. And it would continue, carried forward by everyone who chose compassion over convenience, unity over division, and love over logic.